some opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Welcome, movie fans, to Anatomy of a Movie here on the Popcorn Talk Network. If you haven't already done so, subscribe over on youtube.com/Popcorn Talk Network. There's a whole slew of shows besides ours. And, of course, download and comment on iTunes. Today, we are doing Exodus, Gods and Kings by Ridley Scott, not the 1960s Exodus, not to be confused. We have Dimitri Panos.
Hello, movie fans. Hey, you forgot one thing before we get to the lovely person, Marissa. I wanted you. We're live.
We are live, so what we're doing for those of you who are absolutely dedicated fans of the Popcorn Talk Network, we're changing things up. We're becoming a full online broadcast network. We're streaming live. We're on demand. Anything and everything that you guys want us to be, we are.
So the lovely person to my right gives her introduction. It's live.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Marissa Serafini.
Marissa Serafini, indeed. All right. Overall impressions of Exodus, Gods and Kings.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, we've had the story of Exodus for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, so it's always fun to see different interpretations of the same story in different ways. And especially, it's been a while since we saw a last reenactment of Exodus, so in the story. So I think Ridley Scott did a really good job executing, and we'll obviously get more into it.
I more or less enjoyed it. I feel that I feel that a lot of this movie was left on the cutting room floor. I think like about a month or 3 weeks out prior to its release, I even tweeted this out that the movie was supposedly over 3 hours long.
Yes.
And, I felt that when I was done, even though this movie clocks in at about 2.5 hours, I still felt that something was missing from this. I felt bad. Sigourney Weaver, I mean, the best of her parts had to have been left on the cutting room floor because she maybe said 3 sentences of dialogue throughout the movie.
I felt she was very underutilized.
Yeah, and I also felt like it had some great set pieces. Ridley Scott, he's still at 77 or 76 when he was making this movie. He still knows how to direct a huge scene. And the movie looked fantastic. But even with that said, I felt screenplay-wise, it was missing a defining moment for me. A defining moment like in the 10 Commandments, when Charlton Heston saves that slave. Charlton Heston as Moses saves the slave from being beaten and actually kills Baca, I believe, is the character who's beaten the slave. Like, that's a defining moment that rallies the Hebrews around Moses, and this movie didn't have that for me. And that was I think it had an amazing cast. Yes,
none of who I recognized her. I mean, Aaron Paul's in this movie. If I didn't have that in front of me, I would not know a single thing that he is, in fact, in this movie. Sigourney Weaver, same thing. I knew she was billed to be in this movie.
Right.
And I think, I don't know if they were scared to make it longer, but I could have gone for a little. I was invested enough. It was at a good pace. Mm-hmm. For me, I did enjoy it. I did. The 2 things that I felt that lacked was a better ending. Mm-hmm. And also, and which we'll talk about, and then also his kind of, as the plagues are going on, obviously he's not liking it, but I wanted to know how he was motivating his people.
Right.
You know what I mean? And throughout this, like, hey, we just have to go with it. Because we kept seeing him being looked at when he's talking to God, and there's obviously no one else but him can see it.
Right.
And but how are people interpreting him being able to interpret God?
Right. Yeah. No. And again, I'll make reference as we talk, like, because there was earlier this year, you and I talked about, and you were part of Noah. We talked about Noah, which again is a take, and in some cases we've also talked an unorthodox interpretation of certain things in the movie Noah. But I believe that we all ended up enjoying the movie to various degrees and extents, and that's what I think about this movie as well. I enjoyed it to an extent. I thought the performances actually were I loved Christian Bale. And Edgerton too, who was getting some flack. I thought he was pretty good too. You mentioned Aaron Paul. It took me a couple of minutes, I was like, that can't be Aaron Paul. I never saw him in a trailer. I don't see the credits. I try not to read a lot, and then holy shit, Aaron Paul's in this too. I thought that was.
I still don't know who he is in the movie.
He plays Joshua.
He plays Joshua. He's the guy that.
I just still don't know who that is.
He's the guy that keeps on looking at Moses while he's talking to nothing.
It's just
the kid in the background. But it was just so funny. Like, he was almost like unrecognizable.
Yeah. And I think that's what one of the few little problems with this film was that is such a great cast and such a great lineup of people that a lot of them were underutilized, because we know them from other projects and productions that they've done, that they're so talented, and yet in this film they only had 1 to 5 lines and that was it. And I felt therefore we lost talent because it was all Moses and hardly anyone else.
But here's the thing,
and Ramses, yeah.
But the problem is, with a movie like this, like we're talking about a great ensemble. This is not an ensemble movie. It's not, you know what I mean? It's the story of Moses, and in this case, Ramses. You're not supposed to all of a sudden have it's not American Hustle.
No, but I think the idea was, at least from Ridley Scott, it was supposed to be to an extent a throwback to the Ten Commandments, which had a huge cast. When you're going this big, putting in a cast of people, and we should talk about casting because there's a lot of controversy about the casting and what Ridley Scott said about the casting and such. So
let's start there, since we're kind of digging there already. Again, for me, I just said my stance. I great. But for a movie like this, I think I would like to see people utilize that we haven't seen before. TV shows do that a lot, where they'll cast, one kind of main person to be it, and then they build a good cast of. There's a lot of amazing actors out there. We just don't always know them.
Sure.
And so with this, again, because it's such a large thing, you could use people that we haven't seen before, and then we wouldn't be like, who did Aaron Paul play in the movie?
Right.
Where was Sigourney Weaver? Why was she underutilized? It would just been like, wasn't that, a great actor?
No, I mean, and would you agree, outside of people, well, obviously, Christian Bale, Edgerton, Aaron Paul, Sigourney Weaver, Ben Kingsley, right? I don't know if I'm missing anybody else, but, I mean, the woman that played Moses' wife, unrecognizable. I didn't know who she was. That's not a bad thing. I'm just saying I didn't know who she was. And the other cast that say surrounded Ben Kingsley, the other Hebrews who played a part, who had a part, they were unrecognizable to me as name talent. So I think he brought in a bunch of exotic looking people too, to sort of flesh that out. But the controversy went, as stated in Variety, why Ridley Scott did you only put white, cast only white actors in the lead roles? And Ridley Scott's response, albeit it was somewhat colorful, but it too became a little bit controversial, is he said, it was the way he said it. I understand what he was going for, but he said, look, I'm dealing with a studio that just dumped a ton of money into this movie. I had to hire name actors who could potentially bring in box office. Nobody's going to go see a movie starring Muhammad. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what, right here. I can't mount a film of this budget where I have to rely on tax rebates in Spain and say that my lead actor is Muhammad, so on and so forth, and such and such. I'm just not going to get it financed. So the question doesn't even come up. And I understand what he's saying. He took some jabs for the Muhammad thing, so maybe he should have said it a little differently. But I get why. Look, the Ten Commandments. Jesus, James Cagney. Where's your savior now, Moses? I mean, This type of casting goes on and on and on throughout making Hollywood films. James Bond is not Scottish, but yet you hire Sean Connery. And, this takes place all the time. This isn't anything new. And I think, he made a case, albeit he may have said it wrong, but I didn't have a problem. It didn't bother me.
Marissa, your thoughts?
You know what, and I agree with Ridley. Yes, he should have said it more nicely and with more tact. But also, you do have to put it into the studio's perspective. You do have to bring in the audience, especially for a religious type of story, and not as unfortunate as it is, a lot of people might already be turned off because it's a religious historical type of story. So they might
great point.
They might see it in that way.
Very good point.
In order to bring just regular moviegoers to the and put butts in the seats, you might have to bring A-list actors, despite the fact that they're Caucasian and maybe whitewash this movie.
No, yeah.
But I did not even think of that watching this movie. I never for once thought, hey, that person's Caucasian, that person's also Caucasian, and so is that
person's
person.
English.
I never thought about that. I saw it as the talent and the story that they're executing, not the fact of the color of their skin.
Right. How about you?
I mean, I didn't mind it. I did, there were some interesting points. I know as Moses kind of, he left the comforts of home, so to speak. He had to acclimate himself with his people. And so you could see his face was getting dirtier and dirtier and muddied up. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that was interesting. I mean, I don't know how much I should read into that or not. Ultimately, part of the greater discussion for me is, remember in the movie when at first him and Ben Kingsley are talking, and Moses says to him, I thought you guys were good storytellers. That's a terrible story. So the question for me is, we're talking about this biblical epic history. Right. Do you tell a good story or do you make it historically accurate? Can you make it historically accurate? Is it historically accurate? You know what I mean? Like, what are you going after when you do this type of movie? Again, yeah. Are you trying to put butts in seats and tell a good story, or are you trying to
it's a balancing act or a juggling act or a tightrope act? And you, like with, say, Noah, which is the most recent one, you have to try to balance and do it as best way possible. You gotta cast a wide net, and some people aren't going to be happy. You have to go in, and they go in knowing that some people are just not going to be happy with what you do, but you are entertaining for the masses. Very great point. I mean, you're right. You're entertaining for the masses. You have to make a story that might make people think about religion. Hell, it made Ridley Scott think to an extent about religion, because he's a widely known agnostic. And so when he was picked for this project, some people even said, he's an agnostic. What does he know about this? And Ridley Scott's response to that, I thought, was very smart. He basically was going on and he said, look, when I'm making a movie like this, I do try to put myself in Moses' shoes and walk the walk and walk those thousands of miles and say, where's the story? Now, that's not a religious thing. He goes, that's just like, what is this man's trials and tribulations? What does he have to do? He goes, I respect religion, and people who are dumping on it, there's no need to. But at the same point, like, I am agnostic. Don't dump on me as well. He goes, whatever makes you happy. I'm for, when I'm making this movie, I'm just trying to put myself into that character's shoes so I could try to make the best movie possible. I don't want to make a point. I just want to try to get people to think and try to make a good, entertaining epic.
I mean, I thought, for me, what was, in terms of a biblical thing, what was most kind of, I don't know the right term, alarming or whatever, was, it's one of he has the I am, right? That's his. We'll call him I am. I found that to be a little bit funny, and that's how he figures out that it's God speaking to him. But here he is as a child, and he's so just. At first, he's kind of sweet, I guess, but you just see this his wrath.
He got vengeance. Yes.
You know what I mean? And part of it is, I worry that people look at it and say, oh wow. How can God be in that such a way? But then I think the simpler answer is, I'm going to pull this from Noah. God's going to speak to you in ways that you're going to be able to understand.
Yeah, and to Ridley Scott, because he was asked this question a lot. This came up a lot. First off, that character's name. He actually had a name, the little boy. It was Malak. Malak means messenger. So he was a messenger of God. And, you know, to Ridley Scott, he didn't want... It's been done where God is the voice, comes from a burning bush, comes from the skies, the mountains. And, you know, if you're going to represent God to Ridley Scott in many shapes and forms, which he will appear, the biggest form of all is probably nature. And we saw the wrath or what God can do. And he uses messengers a lot as well. Noah could be a messenger. Moses, in a sense, delivered the 10 Commandments. So, you know, I found that, again, when we talked about Moses and the interpretation of God talking to Moses, they're a little bit unorthodox, but I get it. And in this, using the little boy, I did like it. And as a messenger of God, I didn't know what Malak meant. But knowing that it means messenger, and he's there to carry out that. But you're right, there was that scene he was just pissed.
And I thought that was an interesting interpretation, because also in the book of Exodus, that during the whole burning bush scene, that Moses does talk to an angel, and this was their visual interpretation of that angel, of the messenger and the boy. And the fact that the young little boy, very unseemly, is so angry was a big surprise to me, because we know that God is angry with everything that's going down in Egypt and whatnot. But to have it from a little boy's perspective, I think added another level to it, which made the whole story more serious, that Moses does now have a mission to fulfill.
Yeah. Do you mind if I sort of kind of let out? You and I were talking about this, and to my pleasant surprise, you had read Exodus just prior to coming into the podcast. So I was going to nominate you as our theologian for this.
For those of you who don't listen to anatomy, Marissa is the religious sector of anatomy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I mean, I grew up Catholic. Of course, I've read the Bible a few times, and you know, so like I've been ingrained with the stories of the Bible and whatnot, so I'd like to think I know a good amount of Exodus and whatnot, but of course I don't know everything that went down. But yes, for the historical purposes and whatnot, I still find the stories fascinating.
Yeah, and one other thing too, and I'm going to go to you for reference. I think we both should, as far as seeing that it's still fresh in your head, but also going back to that character of Malak. And so, you know, Moses talked to him a couple of times in the movie, and Aaron Paul's character Joshua usually seemed to be in the wings, like going like, who's he talking to or whatever. So, you know, I think by setting this up, and Ridley Scott says, he goes, look, from the outside, it didn't look like he's talking to anybody. He's, you know, Malak, messenger of God. But also, what if you look at it as being Moses' conscience? What, you know, I mean, we all may have talked to ourselves and one another and trying to sort out an issue or problem, or the best way to, you know, get from downtown to the valley or something. So, you know, I mean, it raises, I think, a lot of great conversational topics that shouldn't be shied or said, oh, that's blasphemy. I enjoyed that approach. And by not having the angel, as you said, you know, Ridley Scott's answer to that was, he goes, I wanted it more reality-based. I didn't want this I didn't want angels. And he goes, I chose a little boy for the innocence that it could bring. And again, when you talk about innocence of a conscience or whatever, it just brings up many levels, which I appreciated that.
Yeah, and that's what I love, that, you know, he's like, okay, they're going to, you know, but I grew up with those, Moses is saying this, I grew up with those people, how can you do this, you know, and like, hey, you know what, they deserve it.
Right.
That's the only way to bring this about.
Yeah, and I think the character choice, why they had Moses literally stuck in the mud too, is that he had no choice but to listen, because he was physically stuck in the mud. Right. So, and I kind of like that element too, that like, no, he has to listen.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, that was for me one of the things that I enjoy about movies like this is that it's one thing to read it in a, you know, book or whatever, right? Just anything in general, historic. But when you get to experience, like, unless you're reading like a day-by-day journal of someone, to really get into the the details of everything. That's what's most exciting about how's he going to deal with this? What's he doing? And that's what I enjoyed about whether Noah or this in particular. You really get to kind of examine it in that way, and and just even Ridley Scott, as you mentioned, kind of going like, okay, what is he going to do? Because we know the story.
Yep.
But how is he making these decisions?
Yeah.
How's he justifying these decisions? Whatever else, and that's I like the inner workings of the clock. So to speak.
Same here. I mean, I did too. That there were just a couple of little plot things. Again, for me, anyways, there was no grand defining moment. Moses sort of kind of accepted like his fate. Would you call it? Like there wasn't anything. It's like Ben Kingsley tells him the story, and then eventually he's like, "Oh, okay, I guess this is what I'm gonna do now." Like, I don't know. I wanted there to be more of his, like, the epiphany, like, okay, this is what I have to do. I'm going to make a statement. And I wanted more dialogue between him and Ramses. I wanted the snake staff. I wanted him to show Ramses, like, dude, look, I didn't believe, but there is a greater power. Like, look what happened. And they just mock him. And it didn't have that one defining moment which turned everything around.
So I want to speak to...
Did you feel the same way? Because
I thought so too. I was very disappointed because in the book Exodus, that happens twice, technically, because the first time when God's speaking to him at the bush, he's like, take your staff, and this is what I'm going to do when you present it to Pharaoh. And then when he goes to the Pharaoh, that's the second time, and we didn't see that. It's a defining moment. Don't you agree? It's one of the first moments that Moses is serious.
Right.
And everyone started to mock him, but that just drives more motivation for all these plagues to start coming.
Right.
Yeah. I thought there was, again, as the movie was kind of cut down, for example, remember when Ramses is playing with the snake and he's talking about the poison, and you just give yourself a little bit of poison so that way, and so he's talking about his father. I thought that could have been a nice thing to tie back later. I thought ultimately their relationship, they grew up as brothers, but I didn't, I accepted that fact, but they didn't fully seem that way.
No.
And we didn't see the full power corrupt, there was no that power corrupted them and they split off. And I thought that was going to be the key to the ending. There was going to be some sort of resolution with them. because Moses throws away his sword, which is supposed to be his. It's always a reminder that you guys, no matter what, are brothers. Yeah. And I thought that was going to be what ultimately kind of resolved this, but it didn't. And I thought that was the biggest opportunity to again tell an amazing story.
Yeah.
Instead of just a good one.
Yeah. They sort of gloss over Moses' upbringing as well. I was a little bit confused as like in the Ten Commandments and such. It's pretty, they do the preamble of the baby in the basket floating down the river comes up, and then we see the relationships that are going on there. This one, we got a title card at the very beginning of the movie, sort of kind of explaining how Moses is where he is.
It just went straight into the film.
It went straight into
and the audience is already led to believe that they're more brother-like than they are.
Yeah.
So I think the fact that we didn't see the backstory of them growing up and building that brotherhood relationship makes us believe, like, having a hard time believe that they were really brothers.
I don't think I needed a backstory. I think just in those, when they were doing stuff together, they it should have just been altered slightly. Yeah. I think their reactions to each other should have been a little bit maybe different, maybe a scene or two, but I don't think that's what I don't know.
Well,
for me.
In this particular movie, I never got why Sigourney Weaver's character hated Moses so much. And
well, that's actually pretty interesting because she plays Tuya,
right,
who is the first wife of Seti, the pharaoh, at that point. But
John Turturro's character.
Yeah, John Turturro. Okay. Well, actually, Tuya, she had two sons, technically, and one of them had already died. So therefore, when that first son died, she grew more attached to Ramesses, and that's why she was more protected over Ramesses and more jealous of Moses, because Ramesses was her only living child and the only heir to the legit throne. So that's why she was more resistant towards Moses.
And I think she knew that I mean, the Pharaoh kind of made it no secret, realistically, of who he liked better.
Oh, yeah. And that's true.
So
that's true.
I could buy that.
Yeah.
But it needed an explanation.
Yeah. And again, I do honestly believe, I could be talking out of my butt for all I know, I believe it was left on the cutting room floor. I do believe, like, I don't, like, the source where I tweeted that the movie was 3 hours and 40 minutes, it's a reliable source. So at one point, that movie, I'm going to believe, was longer than the 2.5 that we got. And I think some of that exposition, which could have helped us along, just didn't make it into the cut that we saw.
Yeah.
That's all.
I don't know. It's one of those things. I mean, if we're going to talk about things that got cut, it's very difficult to make that call. I mean, people are going to complain that it's either too long or that it doesn't have enough. And so finding that right balance, trust me, as I've done a lot of test audience screenings, and as they're a pain.
They are, and we as American audiences, and I'm not lumping this all in, but the majority are very afraid of long run times. They really are. And that's sort of a shame, because one of the reasons why epics were called epics is because they were long. Lawrence of Arabia, the Ten Commandments, these were long epics that actually had an intermission. And I'm all for bring back the intermission. Make a 3.5 hour movie. Give me a break, though. Like give me a 10, 15-minute break to get up, stretch my legs, go to the restroom for a sec. Let me stretch, take a breather, and then I'll come back into the movie. I don't see why a movie theater wouldn't be up for that, because maybe they get more concessions. Maybe somebody goes out and buys some more popcorn or candy or something.
Yeah, because they're going to get more hungry.
Yeah.
They're going to want it.
So bring back the intermission, make a long movie, and just make it good. I mean, these movies back in the day, they entertained the masses, and people would go to these movies a lot, and that's why they were called epics. And the way that they looked and felt and everything. And this one had like those glimpses, like the battle scene at the beginning was awesome, I thought, and that's where Christian Bale to me shined. But that battle as they're coming in on the horse, I mean, that was amazing. And the plagues, I thought were great and stuff like that. So
hey guys, can I ask real quick?
What's
the last movie you remember seeing where they had intermission? Because the last one I remember is Schindler's List.
I want to say Pearl Harbor.
Oh, did Pearl Harbor have one?
Michael Bay Pearl Harbor had a 2-parter.
I've never been part of one, so I can't.
Yeah, I don't even remember. I was at Universal when we released Schindler's List, and I didn't remember an intermission. I mean, you're probably right, because it was 90, what are we talking, 92, 93? So that's a long time ago.
Same year as Jurassic Park, in 93, I believe.
Yeah, so I don't recall an intermission. I can't even recall the last time I went to a movie that had an intermission.
Yeah, Pearl Harbor was 2001, so that was probably the most recent.
So, yeah, and I saw that at the Village, and I don't recall that intermission either. I can't, in all honesty, that's a great question. I don't know.
How about this? I'll tie this in, right?
Yeah.
So, of one of the countries that actually does intermissions is Spain. Mm-hmm. Ironically enough, this was shot in Spain.
Yeah.
So, so there you go. You have that little connection.
Well, here's the thing too. It's shot in Spain. The locations looked beautiful where they shot. 74 days of production on this film. That's fast. Don't you think?
Fast.
I mean, look, and again, Ridley Scott is just turned 77. A 74-day shoot to wrangle this up, get it all together, get your location set, shoot everything. And you know that they shot a lot of, well, I know it's digital, but they shot a lot of footage. Let's just, instead of saying film, 74 days, not too shabby.
That's pretty quick,
Yeah.
And because again, I mean, there's so many. I mean, they obviously their B team and things like that were amazing.
Sure.
But there's a lot of cutaways and there's a lot of just fast stuff that it creates the montage.
Right.
And montage stuff is annoying to shoot. Mm-hmm. Because you got to set it. You're talking about a 2-second shot at best,
right?
But you still got to set it up.
You got to right.
Yeah, and their sets were ginormous. I mean, one of the sets, Christian Bale, I believe, was saying that only one of the sets was little bit short of a kilometer. And so that's a really long set.
Yeah.
And then one of the props, the head of Joel Edgerton, who plays Ramesses, it was like hundreds of, I believe they had 120 people working on it. It took 3 months to set it up for just a couple seconds of shooting.
Yeah. So 74 days is quick. And Scott says that metaphorically aspects, yes, this is probably his biggest project he's done. Even budgetarily, it's probably one of his biggest, which is incredible to me, because you would figure maybe like a movie like Prometheus, budget-wise, which would have had more effect shots. But he's saying that it was definitely this one. So listen, all the money and their work is up on screen. Right? Yeah. I mean, there's no question. Although I will say that I do go back to 10 Commandments, and there is something to say about using live action extras. I mean, because they didn't have CG.
They had over 500, 600 costumed extras.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So, to me, it's different. We'll talk about the end and the parting of the Red Sea and what we thought of that, because that's a monumental moment in any Ten Commandments story. But still, they did a solid job. I love, again, the plagues were great, and I loved how the Red Sea thing, I loved how the genesis of that, how that started.
Yeah.
With the crocodiles and everything. It was a good interpretation.
Yeah.
Now, since didn't Moses turn the sea red?
Actually, Aaron was the one that goes out into the water and uses the staff, and the sea turns red.
Okay.
And that did not happen.
Yeah. All right, let's talk. Let's go to the expert. Let's talk about the plagues and all that from a Bible perspective, and then so that way we can compare them to what took place on screen. The floor is yours. Usually Aaron was the one who executed the first two. The water in the staff, the staff in the water, and that turns everything red. And then also, I believe it was Aaron who helped throw the staff into the Red Sea when they parted it. But for the plagues, I thought it was very well executed, visually stunning, but also very scary as well. Just to see it really seemed realistic, and that's what was really scary to me. And it was plausible. Happened. I like that they brought in that scene of like, well, okay, so with the crocodiles and then the flies and the frogs and then how it all started. Well, the Nile has been kind of doing this, and that's why. So I like that. It's like, well, and for Ramsey's questioning, is this a god or?
This is science, and look what happened to the guy that was logically explaining. Well, this happened. This perpetuated this. A went to B, went to C, went to D. This is what, and then he gets hung.
I like the fact that
that's his job.
Yeah, I know.
His job is to explain it because he's not. The whole. Remember, that's why just the Hebrews in general kept getting hung because they kept saying, "I don't know where Moses is," and then for him, he can't just say, "Oh well, it's their God doing it." He has to come up with an explanation.
Right, and it was and then on the flip side, you had the high priestess woman there, and that was sort of a funny scene. She was like, "Oh, well, how long is this going to take?" And she's in the water with the Red Sea, and she does her chant and swirls it around and dumps it back in. She goes, well, it's not going to happen now. It's going to take a little longer.
Even in the book, that every time that a miracle was performed, that Ramesses always had his men always try to scientifically explain it to him to defy Moses' God. So, and I liked how they had that parallelism going on in the story too. But I did like the scientific element because for someone who isn't religious and who isn't biblical watching this, they would think that too. And I think another good movie that explains that is The Reaping with Hilary Swank, and her character in that film talks about the scientific aspects of one would lead to another.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And the way it was probably the most visceral display of the plagues that I can remember. I mean, they were done, to your point, yeah, they were sort of kind of scary, creepy, and like I love when the locusts go, the frogs were awesome.
Yeah, and I like the fact that like because it does go back to back to back, and how it all executed within probably 10 minutes of the film, which is a long time. But I believe in the book that like the first plague happened with the water, and then a week later the frogs came, and then a week later the gnats came, and then it just kept coming after one. Yeah. When people thought one was done, here comes the next one.
Yeah. It was
I like the aspect that still, despite the, Moses wasn't just a good, you know what I mean? He was questioning throughout this whole thing. And if one thing that at the end, when he's writing the 10 Commandments, hey, put the hammer down if you disagree. And, I've learned, and as he says, I've learned that you don't do unless you actually agree with it. Mm-hmm. And so I like that part of it throughout this whole thing, that Moses is still torn and doesn't know, should I go with this or not? And he'll only do it if he actually agrees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and throughout the plagues, God keeps talking to him and keeps telling him, this is the next plague that's coming, and keep warning Pharaoh and Ramesses that all these things are coming, and and he gives them a chance every single time. Let his people go, right. And if you don't, I'm gonna send the next plague. Right. If you don't, and it just keeps going. And I think that the best one, the way that they executed, was the last one with the death of the first child. Mm-hmm. And it was so simple yet so effective. Mm-hmm. The fact that they literally just stopped breathing and it went cold and dark all at the same time. Yeah. That was scary.
Yeah, that to me was very reminiscent of the 10 Commandments. I mean, there was more of a shadow in the 10 Commandments going from house to house, where this was just a complete darkness. But I love the scenes with the candles going out, and like it was like every house. It's like, oh, they have they have a trail of breadcrumbs leading right to the crib. It's like, and here are the candles. But the way that it was filmed and the sound was great, because you heard the breathing and then you didn't. It just stopped. Very, very effectively done. Yeah, that was great.
And then you hear the wailing and the crying from all the Egyptians.
Yeah.
Which that happens in the book as well, because Moses goes to Ramesses and be like, this is coming, protect your children and slaughter your lambs and whatnot, and that didn't happen. And at that moment, Moses was really angry with Ramesses. Mm-hmm. It's like, this is my final warning to you. If you're not going to listen, this is going to happen. And it's also going to affect you and your child. Yeah. And that.
Yep.
And
it was great, in terms of, even before that, the filming of it and the setup, he's alone protecting his child, right? And I mean, first off, you can't even necessarily trust anybody. So it's not like he can, the typical thing would be like, hey, here's 20 guards and everyone's guarding this child, but it was just him at night, because, because then if one of them turns, then he's got to defend the child against those people. So I like that. It's just him solo next to it, and all the more hard-hitting when the time happens of like, wow, I couldn't do anything about it.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
But I had a warning.
Yeah.
And that was, but when they meet right after that, he says, all the children are dead. Well, not every child.
Right.
Yeah.
And that I like that line from Moses to just, hey, I told you, I don't, and I don't feel bad for you because I didn't warn you.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So. Yeah, and that was, you're right. I'd forgotten about that line.
And I love the distinction. Like, all the Egyptians were affected, but not one Israelite was affected.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
It passed over. Hence, I believe that is
was
the genesis
Passover.
of Passover.
That was the Passover. That was the first night of Passover.
Yeah.
And speaking of Israel, I like very early on when he's checking the mining town, right? And this kind of sets it all in motion when he says, their defiance of God, or whatever he says, and they wrestle with God. Mm-hmm. There's a distinction, and so I thought that was really cool, because that's what ultimately he's doing. He's wrestling with God.
Yep. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I like that. I like that a lot. And again, just other, I guess, I'll bring up other comparisons that I always remember from the 10 Commandments that were a little bit different. And I was curious as to, because I couldn't find any, I was curious as to why they were done differently. Let me get my thought out. For example, even in the 10 Commandments, when Moses finds his wife, they get married and such. She goes along with him on this crusade, so to speak. And I don't know, maybe it was just a plot point to say, look, I'm going to sacrifice my family for this. I don't know. It just seemed that was a hefty sacrifice, but I just remember, would it have hurt the movie had wife, mother, child come along with him so that they can see that, he's really the real deal. He is trying to do this noble. He's trying.
You would have had to have scenes though where I don't know. It just felt like we would have to bring more characters along at a time when we're trying to get rid of characters because we need these people interacting rather than these people.
Yeah, and I think it was also the fact that maybe it was trying to tell the audience that Moses' family is completely safe from all this.
Oh, yeah.
And the Egyptians' families are completely affected. So it might have been that way too.
Speaking of that, we talked about this a little bit, but I'll give it took more than 1,500 visual effects shots for the plagues and the ranks of the Hebrews during the parting of the sea to make that happen.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
It was very well done, I will say that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when Lord of the Rings, the third movie, Return of the King, came out, and I believe that had about 1,200 visual effects shots.
Right.
So we've come a long way to depending on these sort of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say this about the parting of the Red Sea. To me, I have to defer to the Ten Commandments as still being the be all end all to the parting of the Red Sea. There wasn't a parting of the sea on this. I wanted to. I was waiting for the walls. I was waiting for the seas and the tsunami, huge walls in which these people were going down that path. Now, not that it wasn't exciting when the sea was coming back, but it just, to me, it was like, the tide just went out.
Yeah,
and stuff.
But I like that because it's one of those things that, again, as just a bystander, you're just confused. You're like, is there an explanation to this? And because the current's going this way instead of this way all of a sudden. And, it's just one of those things. You wrestle with God. You continue to wrestle with God. Is he there or is he not? What is happening?
I understand it just from a visual standpoint. And again, you got to go back to, what are we talking, mid-50s? 60, or was it the 60s, 64, I believe, for the Ten Commandments. I mean, we are talking visual effects unlike nobody had seen at that point. And to me, it still stands up. And when he parts that Red Sea and it goes up into those walls and they're walking and the walls are just staying back, when everything collapses in, it's amazing. Now, when the tsunamis come in, that too is amazing, and the visual effects that they used for underwater and all that stuff, and the chariots being washed away and everything, that was pretty cool too. But I gotta defer back to, the old school kind of filmmaking where they actually it had to be in-camera effects, and if you go to Universal Studios, you can sort of kind of see how that's done.
Yeah.
It's still tried and true.
I agree. I kind of am upset with the fact that we only saw the second half of the whole thing. We saw the water caving in, we didn't see it part. And as a story reader, reading the Exodus, because the Bible even explains there are walls on the right and the left and people walking in the middle. So I wanted to see that, and the fact that it was just the water's gone. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, well, may I point something out that's visually, it's here in the studio. Look, Exhibit A. The wall, it's coming up on a wall, and I didn't get that shot. I didn't get that shot, and I sort of kind of wanted that shot. But nonetheless, it
good
was
marketing.
Great marketing.
Well, even the regular poster, right? It's just Moses very, very tiny and this big wave of So I get it.
I love the although I did like the chariot scenes on the mountain trail, and I was going, okay, well, when is they can't all make it this, something has to happen, and when things happen, that was great too.
Yeah, but as great as that was, I don't think that was needed, because they spent the money on destroying chariots falling off the edge of the cliff rather than splitting the water.
Sure. Yeah.
So we saw that instead of what we should have seen.
Yeah, you're probably right.
But I mean, to that, I did like, again, when Ramses even throws his own person off of the chariot, because he's like, we got to go back, and it just showed his determination, his hatred for Moses to prove him wrong.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like nothing was going to stop him, no matter what. Right. I don't know. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, it was cool. I'm not taking.
I know. Yeah, okay.
YouTube, the parting of the Red Sea.
It was cool. The cliff was cool. It was not necessary.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. We'll go with that.
We are going to talk about. I did fun. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. There was one thing, because they are walking and traveling. The Israelites are walking and traveling in the desert for days and days. One thing, an element I really wanted to see that we didn't, was the manna and the quail and the pillars of fire and clouds that guided the Israelites throughout the desert every single day. We had manna in the morning, the bread, so that they could eat, that would rain from the sky, and then the quail at night so they can eat. And we didn't see any of that.
And again, I wonder if it was ever shot. I couldn't find any evidence that it was, but it's interesting.
Because they can't just walk in the desert for days without eating or water.
And without being
And they were guided by pillars of smoke throughout the day and pillars of fire throughout the night.
Yeah. Interesting.
I think ultimately it wasn't shot. Because again, I think it was very it was as realistic to me as it could have been, for acts of God.
Right.
So he gave him just what was necessary, and it's Moses seemed to know the way.
His moral compass, can we say?
Let's go with
guiding
that.
Him.
And we'd also know that he survived multiple times, and so it's not easy, but there is a way to do it. Mm-hmm. But that's, in terms of, you're absolutely right. Every time I saw one of those deserts, I was like, there's nothing here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no flare going up telling me where to go.
There's no food, there's no water. He shot that one rabbit early on, and that was it. That was the only thing that moved.
It's a rabbit with big white fangs.
Yeah, we did get that quick moment when he was technically lost, and he was just sitting there praying. He's like, "Where do I go? I don't know." And we didn't see that visual reinforcement of the fires, of the smoke that we know that existed in the book. Yeah. He was just sitting there.
Yeah. No, good point.
Had they had one little effect, it would have helped.
Something to help an audience.
You're like, yes, okay, now I know.
Now I know how they're surviving. Yeah, good. Yeah, no, another good point. The approach of filming this movie, you're Christian Bale. Hey, I want you to play Moses. So I found his approach to taking the role and going into big sandals, let's say. I thought it was sort of comical, but. You know what? I appreciate Christian Bale even more now. He said one of the first things he did, one of the first movies he used for reference, believe it or not, and there was at least, there were 4, but the first one he did was Monty Python and the Life of Brian. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is a satirical slapstick Monty Python comedy. Then he said, I also wanted to look at, I always look on the bright side of life. He looked at Mel Brooks, the first part of History of the World, part 1, has that great scene. It's like, I bring to you the 15. Oops, the 10, these 10 commandments. It's a great scene. And then, he watched the 10 commandments as well. But the reason being why watching Life of Brian and even say, and History of the World Part 1 was, he's like, I watch those movies because they're good in their own right, but this is how a serious movie can go wrong and go bad. And I don't want to be, unintentionally, I don't want to be the Life of Brian. We have to play this for real. We have to make this work. And this is showing me what I shouldn't do. Albeit I love these movies and I laugh at them. But this is the direction that it can go in, and these movies are out there, and I don't necessarily want this to turn into History of the World Part 1. He said, I watched 10 Commandments because you have to give props, he says, to Charlton Heston. It's like, you know, it's. I'm not trying to be Charlton Heston. He's amazing in that role. He goes, but you know, I have to pay it homage. I have to pay it its due respect. And again, as a fan of Christian Bale, number one, it shows that he does have a bit of a sense of humor. And it's a unique way of looking at how to approach a film like this. I don't think I've ever heard of an actor saying, well, you know, I'm going to go look at a Monty Python movie. You know, like if anybody's doing Camelot, nobody says, well, I'm going to watch the Holy Grail. You know, but I like how this is how we shouldn't be approaching this movie, because this is how it can go bad unintentionally. And you're right, when you're making an epic of that sort, look at Dune. That's how a movie can go bad epically. So.
Well, speaking, you know, I mean, let's segue into then the response, because I enjoyed it. You guys overall enjoyed it, but it is not being heavily as well received.
28% critics off of Rotten Tomatoes. That's low.
Very low.
Very low. And this, yet again, is another movie that I don't feel deserves 28%. I think that's very low average for reviews as well. You too?
I think it's very low, and I don't know if it's the fact that it is a biblical story that's automatically turning people off, or the fact that people are comparing it to other Ridley Scott films, which are very epic and long, very grandiose type of films too. So I'm really having a hard time believing where people didn't like this film.
Yeah, or like maybe not give it, like maybe it wouldn't be like in the 90s, 80s. I would figure, after watching it, I'm thinking, oh, geez, what is it? 28? I'm thinking 75, 76.
60s. Yeah.
At the very least. At the very least, you know? But the cinema score, so this is from Pure Audience, they gave it a B-. And I'm curious, like, because I would say BB plus for me, probably a solid B. I'm just wondering what may have turned it off.
Here's my question, and I know the answer, but for audience sake, when are these tests given, the cinema score?
Right after they are done opening weekend, definitely Friday and Saturday, right as the audience is coming out of the movie.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. Right as the audience is coming out of the movie.
Yeah.
The movie is good. The ending doesn't leave you with a good feeling. Like it just ends. And so if that's the last feeling that you have right before you're about to tell someone a score, you're like, okay, B-. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it's tough to make the, you know, that's what really the ending. If they just fix that ending just a little bit.
What was unsatisfactory to you?
He just rides away.
Yeah,
that's it. There's nothing happened. He just rode away. He just wrote he didn't read the 10 Commandments to anybody. He didn't say the 10 Commandments to anybody. We didn't see how people now interpreted the commandments.
Right.
We've never seen him lead.
I completely.
What kind of?
I agree with that too, because of the fact that you said that, like, he didn't even say what each 10 Commandments were. I thought, because if you aren't religious and you're going to see this movie, the regular audience member would be like, okay, what are the 10 Commandments? And he's like, I think they allow the audience to relied on them too much to know what they are.
Right. Which, by the way, would have been a nice refresher for anybody who does, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And even in the story, because in the story of Exodus, if you keep continuing after this movie where it ends, is that one of the commandments is, thou shalt not have other gods.
Right.
And then when Moses comes down from the mountain, he finds all the Israelites have built this god-like idol image from their gold that they melted down, and they're dancing around honoring a god, a false god. So like automatically Moses is upset, and they automatically break one of the first commandments in like the first day.
And so isn't the messenger of God, Malak. There's a look on his face that's like, can I teach these people anything? Like, what the hell? Like, good God.
Yeah, but that's the upsetting thing with the story of Exodus as well, because after the 10 Commandments, they're still in the desert for another 40 years. It still continues. Yeah. So I can understand that you might have a hard time ending it, because we, the audience, knows it's still going on for years.
Yeah. Let me ask you this: when was I the only one who's thinking this way? So they're making their trek. He had done the 10 Commandments, and he was in his stagecoach, whatever that was.
Yeah.
Okay. And he's much older at this point, and he has the glimpse of Malak, the little boy, the messenger, outside, walking outside. But behind him was what is supposed to be the 10 Commandments. Am I the only one that was thinking of, that's the Ark of the Covenant?
The Ark of the Covenant.
That's going to get
Indiana
lost
Jones.
in Indiana Jones. And haven't any of you guys ever been to Sunday school before? And I'm like, that's what I was just thinking. Oh, all right. I sort of kind of know, because Indiana Jones, they talk about going to Canaan and whatnot. And that's just me.
No,
I was just geeking out a little.
I immediately thought Indiana Jones too. I was like, well, there's the Ark.
It's the Ark of the Covenant.
Before it gets lost.
Yep.
There you go.
Well, thank you. Thank you for validating my geekiness.
No, I'm right there with you.
Yeah. What did we think of like the editing and cinematography and pacing and all that fun stuff?
Visually, it was gorgeous. I mean, and they built big real life sets too, so that I appreciate. And they had big special effects too, lots of green screen in Spain. And Spain's a beautiful place too. So I mean, for the historical accuracy and the visually of the environment, I believed every single thing.
I liked, they had the two distinctions, because Ramses was like, you build monuments because it inspires power. Right. So when we saw those things, we saw power. And then we got the other flip side when it just looks so drab. Right. And even Moses says, like, hey, I don't want to disrespect you, but they're civilized, you're not. Yeah. And so I liked, visually, they reaffirmed a lot of those kind of feelings.
Yeah, and the gentleman, Dariusz Wolski, who's worked with Ridley Scott before on Prometheus and The Counselor, Exodus, he's also done the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. The look of this film was big and epic, and I did like the contrast between what Egypt looked like and then when you went out to the sands. And you brought up a point as like Moses those people were like sand dirty, because there were the slaves. You could see there was a noticeable difference between those and the Egyptian people. And I liked how it looked. I liked the color that were used, and the desert looked amazing. Yeah, it looked fantastic.
I also like the wardrobe of the Egyptians as well. The fact that, yes, there was heavy guy liner going on, but the fact that you had the distinction, just royal, you can distinguish royalty from the regular Israelite slave. Right. And so much gold tone and gold color theme in Egypt compared to the rest of the desert.
Yeah, and the editor too, Billy Rich, he had to, he had a huge task ahead of him. I don't know if we'll ever know what the original cut of this film was, but he's worked with Ridley before, a lot of movies, Robin Hood, Body of Lies, Black Hawk Down. So, his editing, again, some of the pacing I thought was sort of fine, although I do think a lot of good parts may have been left on the cutting room floor. Again, I can't, like, the opening battle to me was, I love that, because that did throw back to me to like the epics of 10 Commandments and how it looked and how it was cut and paced.
What about even Gladiator?
Yeah, it had a lot of that sort of, but to me this was a more Cecil B. DeMille-ish, that opening scene, even more so than Gladiator. And I felt I really loved Christian Bale in the opening scenes too, because he was the guy barking out. It should have been Ramesses, but I know that he was like Ramses. Military. Ramesses. He was Ramesses' military guy. But the way he took command, like I looked, like there was definitely, you could see, even though Ramesses was supposed to be the guy, yeah, they were following this Moses guy, because he knew what he was doing, and the way that he was commanding out orders, that whole opening fight scene I thought was great.
And that was the whole, one of the most fun things for me was Ramses was not a leader. Whereas Moses was. I mean, you could see, like, all he did was, it's one thing to bark out orders, it's another thing to lead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even when, was it his dad? It was Ramses' father who said, hey, I want you to go, and you got to talk to that to that guy and what the hell's going on over there? And Moses says, "I'll go. You're not good at this. Let me go."
Well, that was also after the Pharaoh told him, "Hey, I think you were a better leader than him."
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the problems I had with Ramesses' character in itself. And I don't know if that was just the actor's choice, Joel Edgerton's choice, and how he portrayed Ramesses, but I didn't see Ramesses as a intimidating, fearful leader that so many hundreds of thousands of Israelites had to literally work for him as slaves,
right,
and follow him and do his commands. I didn't see that overbearing, overpowerful figure, and I had a hard time believing he was such a scary person and he would be leading all these people. And I always thought Moses was had more physical presence than
I agree with that.
Ramesses did.
Absolutely, and you're right. I as much as I enjoyed Joel Edgerton's performance because it had to go with a little bit of nuance, because he was a character that knew he may not be father's best, but he knew he was eventually going to get the throne, perhaps, and he had to delegate. And you have to, he didn't play it as much, because it could have gone the route where he played it as being the jealous brother. But there didn't seem to be a lot of jealousy between the two. They actually, I did get a sense that they loved each other as brothers. But Joel Edgerton's no Yul Brynner. Yul Brynner was he was a figure. He was a character. And I think, too, when you're making an epic as well, your characters, much like your setting, your story, your characters have to be larger than life. And I did feel at some points they didn't fill the screen as much as the background did. Yeah, sometimes. So,
and that's a decent analogy. Well, we could talk about music.
I enjoy the score. As I think I say every podcast that I enjoy instrumental, epic building music, and I really felt at the end when when he's riding off in the carriage and then the credits starts rolling, I really felt like all the emotions just flooding in, and that's when I thought, I was like, hey, this was a big epic movie.
Yeah. So yeah, for me the score was fine. It filled in nicely. Yeah. It did help set tone where needed. I enjoyed it. We didn't talk about Sir Ben Kingsley.
We did not.
Yeah.
And personally, again, I'm not sure if his role was cut. I don't know.
He filled his purpose. His purpose was to tell Moses that he's a Hebrew.
Right.
Check that, and after that, just put him in some scenes.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I mean, that's and what ended up happening. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about? I guess we could let's talk about budget, because we've been kind of hinting at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have production budget as 140. Now, along with P&A, what would that kind of? Do you think we'd get to 200 million?
Yeah, I was looking at 185 million, including prints, advertising, hard drives, and advertising. Okay. Is what I'd found out. It could be
that's a small budget for
all things considered.
Especially the marketing budget.
Absolutely. Yeah, all things considered.
And this is one of Ridley Scott's highest budget feature films that he's made.
Yeah, which surprised me, because I mean I guess you're accounting for inflation, because I would figure that Gladiator wasn't cheap, Prometheus couldn't have been too cheap. Yeah. The Counselor was definitely a lower budget movie. But for 100, if that's a true or close to true number, 185 million for this, like for a 2.5 hour epic where visual effects heavy to an extent. Yeah, it's they got them cheap.
They got them cheap, and I think. One of the things, it's not making its full money. We talked about the reviews and things like that. It's not making its money that it should have been, or that they were expecting. I think the worldwide audience will help, but it certainly doesn't help that Lord of the Rings is already knocking. It's already here.
Well, it came out at the same time.
Yeah, let's take a breather and talk about that a little bit. The reason for its release date was not so much to not so much to like have the hugest opening weekend, but it was to take advantage of the holiday season that it's getting into. You don't want to go neck and neck with The Hobbit, obviously, but you want to try to stay in theaters for as long as possible now that we're going into the holidays, and now that people are going to be on vacation, and now that Christmas Day is one of the biggest movie going days in like a box office history. Like you have the summer, night before Thanksgiving, but Christmas Day is a huge day for box office, and then you're hoping to ride that wave somewhat, and then go into January. So you would mention, as of today, our total domestic gross is around $30 to $32 million. That's okay. Worldwide gross is 86. It's been doing pretty well overseas. So now their hope is for them is that they'll ride a wave, so to speak, through the holiday season. That maybe people will come back. Now the other big thing that is sort of a wild card is that we all know that The Interview has been pulled from release, so that's going to leave an empty slot. So where people may have gone to The Interview, maybe they'll go to The Hobbit, maybe they'll go to Exodus, maybe they'll go to Big Eyes, or maybe now it takes one choice out of the equation for audience members, and all in all, we'll see how.
That was a comedy.
Does.
That was a comedy choice. You think Night at the Museum is now going to get a boost from the
well,
comedy
it's the
fans?
Kids, well, it's being it's a kids movie. It could, but you wouldn't be taking kids to go see that, and maybe an older audience. They might say, hey, you know what, Exodus. I don't know.
But I think for The Interview, you would take away that male demographic that would go see The Interview. Might go see Exodus.
They might. I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see how all of this plays out. But the reasoning behind putting Exodus where it was they were more concerned about their multiple. They were more concerned about what they were going to make in the future than what they were going to make that opening weekend. And let's face it, they were number one for the opening weekend. It did $24.1 million, which you would expect a little more. Out of a movie like that, you would hope, but still, if you end up having, they're gonna need a good ride into the holiday season to make American box office or domestic box office.
Do you think this film would have done better had it released during the actual Passover time of the year?
It's a great question,
in the summer time?
Yeah, I was thinking like, would people get it had it been released around Easter time, because that's the Ten Commandments perennially or annually, I should say, plays on TV on Easter Sunday. So I don't know if people may have gotten that joke if they had done that. I don't know, but I'm trying to think when Noah came out, because I think Noah came out around
March.
That time? Yeah,
March of 2014.
Yeah, they could have, and there may have been another movie that they didn't want to compete with, or in all honesty, the movie itself probably wasn't ready back in March, April.
That is true. I mean,
so it probably wasn't ready.
And the filming Exodus was the principal filming was like last year, 2013.
Yeah. So cutting the movie, special effects, that's my guess. And they may have thought too that they may have thought in one way, shape, or form that maybe they might have an Academy run in one way, shape, or form. Sometimes you don't know that until your film is finished. And after you've picked a release date, like had they pulled it from the holiday season and maybe released it in January, that doesn't necessarily look good. But
do you think Christian Bale pulled off an Academy Award-winning performance?
Not compared to other performances I've seen thus far. I mean, he's good. I think the special effects might get something like a nomination. Sound editing, tech specs, I think, but not.
Yeah, I completely agree. For the acting moment, this wasn't like over the top. Complete transformation from his character. I think as an actor he can do so much more, and visually it was a grand film, but as an actor and story wise, not so much.
Yeah, agreed.
I would agree as well.
What are your thoughts?
I don't, again, it's in comparison, there's a lot better stuff in terms of performance, right? If we're going toe to toe with somebody, and even just in his own right, I've seen him, not that he's doing a bad job or but I've seen him do better. So
Yeah.
So that is what I would say about that.
Yeah, which could be tough, again, going into this holiday season. People are going to have some more choices to go. So we'll see. We'll see how it hangs in.
We'll see. Well, let us know below in the comments, whether on iTunes, whether on YouTube, on our website, popcorntalk.com. It doesn't matter. Just interact with us. Also, follow us at The Popcorn Talk on Twitter. And, keep the discussion going. I mean, there's so much to talk about this movie, but we don't need to create our own 3-hour epic here.
I think we covered it all. Thank you. Marissa, Phil, great points. Hey, folks, because we are heading into the holidays, so I want to wish you guys happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you folks as well. Here's the Exodus.
Yeah.
Have the Exodus.
Fun and safe holiday.
Yeah, have a happy.
And follow Marissa at.
You can follow me on Twitter at Serafini TV.
And Dimitri
at DMovies1701.
And like I said, check out other Anatomy of a Movie dissections. We've got a lot coming up in 2015. We've done a lot in 2014. We're about to round things off. And guess what? In addition to that, there's a whole slew over this holiday break while things kind of quiet down. Check out other Popcorn Talk Network shows, whether Box Office Breakdown on Mondays, Jedi Alliance. We've got Marvel movie news. We've got DC movie news. We've got Meet the Movie Press. The list goes on and on. And you know what? As an added bonus, obviously you're listening to this, so you should check out Profiles with Malone and Mance as they interview the one, the only, Ridley Scott.
Nice.
In their profiles of, ironically, Ridley Scott. So definitely check that out. There's a lot. There's great content out there. We'll see you here next time for another
Bye, all.
dissection.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.